So good afternoon. Thanks for joining us on this beautiful, beautiful Saturday. I hope you're enjoying the fair. Fairs are a great time to bring everyone together. And this is a topic today on collecting. The formal title is Demystifying the Collecting Market through Warhol. But if you've come to some of the other lectures the ADAA put on yesterday, a lot of discussions I hear at the fair, some of the themes we'll address today are, what does collecting mean now? What are the values look like, and how can we be part of the market? We have a great group, so come on in, make yourself at home. If you could turn your cell phones off, that would be great. And we'll get started. So I wanted you to get to know your experts for today. Starting on my immediate right is Chris Perry from Northern Trust. And Northern Trust, we thank them for being the sponsors for this discussion today. I'm going to read the bios because they're quite impressive of the panelists. So Chris Perry is from the Boston office. He's in charge of trust and account administration, planning services, and coordinating family offices through their Boston office. He serves as the primary contact for client families with complex trust, partnership, and charitable accounts. Prior to joining Northern Trust, Mr. Perry served as an attorney in the Trust and Estates Department of Choate Hall & Stewart. I'm really excited to speak with Chris today because in my work at AXA Art, we do so much with families and planning and long-term, and I'm really excited to hear what the future looks like. What can we do? What can't we do? So thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome.
I'm so happy we have Lisa with us because she's our expert on the market. She's here from Christies. She's been all over, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Lisa joined Christies in 1987. She completed the Christies Fine Art Education course, where she pursued a thesis on the business potential of using the retail shop in order to subsidize British museums. Upon her return to the U.S., Ms. Cavanaugh worked on the Christie Chicago office, overseeing business development for estates and appraisals in the Midwest market. Since 2001, Ms. Cavanaugh has reassumed responsibility in supervising the appraisals and consignments that originate in the Midwestern market. Ms. Cavanaugh manages the business development efforts of Christie's regional office in North America, working both with trust and estates professionals as well as not-for-profit organizations. She's a graduate from Smith College and an MBA from Northwestern. So one of the reasons Lisa's here today is obviously to talk about the market. We're going to have some images, so I'm just going to pass these over to you when we finish the...
Okay, great. Thanks.
And to give us a broader visual context in terms of collecting, what to expect, and what's next in terms of the market and what to anticipate. And then finally, on my left, I wanted to introduce you to Patrick Moore from the Warhol Museum in Pittsburgh. He's best known for his work as the director for the estate projects of artists with AIDS. The estate project was an effort to preserve the cultural artifacts of the AIDS crisis and to present exhibitions with major museums. The project also assembled permanent archives and with the New York Public Library, the Pacific Film Archives, and other larger institutions. So for those of you who haven't visited Patrick, over right in the back,
Booth 805.
Booth 805, I wanted to welcome you with Patrick as the Deputy Director of the Warhol Museum. So I think just to give some visual context, could we start, Lisa, with you and some of the images you've prepared for today?
Yes, what I thought made sense, since we've sort of framed this in the Warhol context, I thought it made sense to put up some images, and I tell people we can't talk about art as we know and walk around here and not actually look at images. So it's great for us to sit here and talk, but you really need to see things too. So this is an example of a Warhol piece that was sold at auction the date of this was November of 12. And it was, it's part of Warhol's Endangered Species series. And just to put it, and I don't like to throw, numbers are relevant to give you a frame of reference, but I don't throw them out for any bragging rights or anything like that, just to give you some idea. But this sold for $1.2 million. This piece is 60 by 60. The next one I'm going to show you is a new Coke can, a Warhol silkscreen, and this one was executed in 1985. The prior one was 1983. It sold also at auction, and it was estimated at $25,000 to $35,000, and it sold for $93,000. This sold privately. And the reason I bring this up is because we have been, many of you may have read, Christie's been entrusted with the Warhol Foundation assets to sell them over a period of, we think, sort of 6 to 7 years. And we are doing that through traditional auction, through private sale, and also through online. And this one was sold privately. I don't have the figure on it because those are not public knowledge. And then this final one here we sold online. It was estimated at $5,000 to $7,000, and it sold for $11,000. That's a current bid, actually, because it's still online until the middle of next week. So we'll do the online sales in a discrete time frame. So you'll know about them. You can go online and bid, much like sort of an eBay kind of model. And then we also are doing private sales through a pop-up shop option where we're taking images. We had a group of Warhol images in Minneapolis in March. Yes, we did it in March in Minneapolis. Never did figure that one out exactly why, but we did. We'll be doing a Warhol exhibition in our Chicago office for 2 weeks in October. We did an exhibition in Aspen, and we're going to be doing probably one, interestingly, in Des Moines, probably next year in conjunction with a Halston exhibition that the Des Moines Art Center is mounting. So the point of it from a collecting standpoint is that we're all here. You go to dealers and you look at things. You can engage auction houses in a lot of different ways than just traditional auction format. So. And we're doing that with the Warhol material. So that's...
Great. Okay. And for you, the next set.
Okay. Well, I want to say it's great for the Warhol Museum to be represented here in Chicago because we focus also on other cities that are in proximity, more or less, to Pittsburgh. So anyone who has not been to Pittsburgh, please come. You can go to Falling Water, which is just outside the city, and it makes a great weekend trip. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the reason that a museum would be at an art fair and how collectors can potentially interact with museums. Most museums may have a slight discomfort at working in the commercial market, but of course Andy Warhol saw absolutely no difference between making money and making art. For Andy, in a weird way, the art of the business was even more interesting in some ways. So many people, of course, when they start to collect, would think that some of the great names of contemporary and modern art are kind of beyond their grasp. But for museums, collectors are our lifeblood, so it's really part of our mission, both at the Warhol and at every other museum, to develop collectors. And that can be daunting. I'm sure people who've walked through the fair today know that it can be hard to sort of gauge how to interact with dealers, with other people who might be offering work. And so at the Warhol, we've decided that we're going to be in the editions business. Now, obviously, we're not going to make new Warhols because Andy's not around and we're not going to sell our collection. But for us, if we would not have received the entirety of our collection from Warhol's estate, which later became the Warhol Foundation, we would not be able to assemble that collection at this point. The market is so high for Warhol, it would just be literally financially impossible to put together our collection, which is the largest collection in the world. But what we do is to continue to acquire and look at ephemeral materials that were around Warhol that explain his work, to provide context. Everybody knows that a Warhol is meant to be important, but unless you understand the kind of enormity of Andy's innovations, of bringing commercial brands into fine art, for example, it's very difficult for people who are sort of being introduced to Warhol to understand the importance of that. So the edition that we brought here, we were very fortunate to work with a publisher in Miami named Kiwi Arts Group. And Kiwi Arts Group was really fantastic because they had they'd found a group of images that were taken of Andy in the early 1960s. And we all know that there are millions of photographs of Andy Warhol in the world. But what Kiwi did was to present these images by the artist William John Kennedy, who was Warhol's friend, both as a gift to the museum, but they also produced an edition for us to raise money for the museum. So this is not a Warhol photograph. However, if there's somebody who's interested in Warhol, it's an excellent way to enter that market, because these photographs reveal Warhol in the context of his artworks. So the first image, you see Andy is in his silver studio, his silver factory, and he's looking out through the face of Marilyn, the acetate that would go on to be the basis of many of his greatest paintings. These sorts of images are not only a way for us to raise money, but this particular image has become sort of a calling card for the museum. Our first floor is being redesigned, and a 16-foot tall version of this will be in the lobby. So again, somebody who is starting to collect may say, I can't even afford a drawing at $5,000 to $7,000, as wonderful as it would be to have that. But there are other ways to enter the market, and it's great to work with museums, to work with people like Christie's, because you really have the imprimatur of somebody who knows the market. And I'm sure everyone knows that Warhol, Dali, Chagall, these are images that you see, not to denigrate certain galleries, but they're images that you see selling for a lot of money in places that you can't quite be sure what you're getting. So there is a really big impetus, I think, to get involved with Christie's, with the Warhol, with the museum that can help guide that process. I'm not going to take up too much time with each image, but isn't it extraordinary that this photographer was able to convince Andy Warhol to make a sandwich board out of two of his paintings and to sell it? And, you know, who better than Andy Warhol to hawk his paintings with a sandwich board? But the subject of this painting, which is the race riots that were happening in the United States at the time, really reveal a part of Warhol that a lot of people don't know. He was deeply invested in images that were not just celebrity portraits, but were also really indicative of what was happening in American culture. Warhol looking up on the fire escape outside the factory, sandwich board again of his self-portrait, which is the logo of our museum in Pittsburgh. This is an interesting image because Watson Powell ran an insurance company in Des Moines, and Andy was working on the portraits of Watson Powell that he had commissioned, and all of these sort of test prints were laying around the factory. So Andy and William John Kennedy stapled them together and literally left a little window for Andy to kind of peer through and have his portrait taken. And we really consider this a double portrait because Andy considered himself a businessman. Let me tell you that he was not all night at Studio 54 with Liza Minnelli. He went in the front of Studio 54, got his picture taken, hung out with Liza for a little bit, and then went out the back because he wanted to be in bed by 11 o'clock so he could get up and make more work the next day. And this is a lovely image, very sweet. Amazingly, Warhol was convinced to trundle out to a field in Queens with a newly painted flowers painting with his friend Bill Kennedy, and to stand up in this field of flowers with his work behind him.
Great.
So just to give you an idea that if you are interested in collecting Warhol, there are other ways into the market, and it allows us to kind of work with people to understand that Andy Warhol is still being revealed. Many of Andy's films have not been seen by one person in the world except our curators. So you'll continue to see that Warhol's influence, his body of work, reveals itself over at least another decade. And I think that that's what makes Warhol somebody who has a future rather than kind of hitting an apex of the art market.
Great. Thank you, Patrick and Lisa, for giving us a visual context to start the dialogue today. So I think if we go back to the title of the program, which is Demystifying Collecting Through Warhol, I asked the first question to everyone, which is this appropriate? I mean, what is the market like? Is it mysterious? Is it relevant? How do we define it today? Lisa, could you start?
I've had a lot of discussions in the last couple of days at the fair about the relevance of fairs, and I think there are many people here who would be sort of considered themselves as having fair fatigue because There's one, it seems like there's a fair propping up about every month. But what I find interesting here is that people are having more dialogues with the gallery owners, and maybe it has to do with being in the Midwest, and there are a lot of people who feel they want to build relationships with some of the dealers. But I was saying to people, you should feel comfortable going in and asking the questions. You should feel comfortable when there's not a price on something, saying to somebody, what is the price of this object? And I think there is an intimidation in the art world, both on the auction front and with galleries, not so much with museums, but a little bit of a feeling of, I can't ask. It's like going into a wine shop and being embarrassed because you don't know what kind of wine to buy. People need to kind of ask questions and get comfortable with it, and I think you're a better collector when you have that kind of understanding, when you're not bashful about going out and asking the questions.
Well, yeah, I think that everybody sees the auction results of Warhol selling for $30 or $40 million, and there is a mystique to that that really implies that there's only a high end of the market, so that there wouldn't be an entry point. And, you know, that beautiful drawing of the shoes,
Right.
estimated $5,000 to $7,000, you'll see a lot of work around that price point in a fair like this, and also much, much higher. It's fabulous that you can still buy an original Andy Warhol drawing that has his hand in it, that shows his past as a commercial illustrator. You know, I think there are many price points still in the Warhol market, so I think that is a myth that it's only very, very high end.
Lisa, I wanted to return to you as we talk about the market and accessibility. Now that Christie's has gone online can you tell us a little more about why that decision online? Is it something because of Andy's body of work that it can be accessible to anybody in terms of the language? What's the impetus for the online?
Well, we've established ourselves obviously as a traditional auction house, and then there are a couple reasons why online makes sense. We started the first major online sale that we did was with Elizabeth Taylor's jewelry. And what we noticed from that was that it allowed people to participate in the process at a different price point, and it also introduced new people to the auction environment. So I think we've done the same with the Warhol, is that there is material that is more kind of fun to be online than it does engage more people than having it be in a traditional sort of auction setting.
Okay. I asked the same question to you about the market and accessibility. How is it? Is it the price point or just this large body of work that makes it so relevant to collectors today?
Well, this usually would not be a nice thing to say about an artist, but I think it is a nice thing to say about Warhol. He's become a brand. And I think that that's why online particularly works with Warhol. But the flip side of that is people may not realize that an auction house like Christie's has fabulous specialists who work with collectors to answer questions, to guide them through the process. So yes, online is great, it's convenient, but I had dinner with a collector last night. He'd worked extensively with Christie's to understand the market, even though he may have bought online. So I think that building that relationship still gives people a greater ease, regardless of whether it's online or not. And we're partners with Christie's in Asia right now, and we have a huge retrospective exhibition opening in Beijing next week. Christie's has a sale of Warhol work. There are many, many new markets to be developed for work like Warhol that is so well known. And it's really a great entry point for the market, because if Western art is something that's new to you, probably Warhol is one of the names you know and would feel comfortable starting with.
Great. I'd like to bring you into the discussion from we were talking about relationship, what Christie's is doing, what you can expect from going to a museum. Tell me more about Northern Trust and what role you are working with collectors.
Sure. Thanks, Jill. So I actually really like the word demystification, because I think that it really does capture this kind of trying to take something that's complicated and mysterious and make it simple and make it clear. And one of the approaches that we take with our clients who are collectors, who are trying to figure out kind of what's the best way to approach this, is to advise that they look at their artwork as an asset. And indeed it is. It's hanging on the wall and you enjoy it, but the reality is that a valuable piece of artwork is like any other asset. It needs to be managed, it needs to be planned for, it needs to be preserved. And so from our standpoint, we kind of have some tips for a client who's thinking about an acquisition. Our first kind of point of reference is who's on the team? Mm-hmm. Who is the team that's around the collector that is able to help make sure that the investment that's being made is a good one?
Sure.
I think it starts with the art advisor. It starts with a really well trusted, educated person who can be a sounding board for the client, who can really walk through a lot of the questions. We encourage clients to get educated. Knowledge is power in this area, so ask a lot of questions. Have a good art advisor there. Art insurance is a key part of the picture, not only because it's critical to preserve these assets, but also because how you house them, how you hang them on the wall, what's the best way to incorporate them into your life in a way that will preserve them is something that an art insurance agent can really help with. Title insurance is critical as well. And then also thinking about the appraisal, regularly getting the artwork appraised is an important piece of the puzzle. So those are kind of the members of the team that we would recommend looking at. Then the next step is, well, do you have the liquidity? Are the funds there, and what does that mean? Do you have cash available? Is it earmarked for other things? Does it make sense to think about borrowing? Does it make sense to think about selling other assets? There are capital gains tax implications. So again, kind of taking a step-by-step approach to helping a client get comfortable with the collecting process. And then I think, we kind of go to Providence and we think, how do this is an opportunity at the very beginning of the process to really make sure that you have all of your ducks in a row around the title to the, and the chain of title and getting your documents in a really safe place. So
Okay.
Those are some kind of tips.
Great. Well, speaking on that idea of relationships, I guess effectively for a collector, we all four would work together. So from an appraisal standpoint,
Right.
from an insurance perspective, from a donation standpoint. It's kind of one of the reasons that we're all tied together. Lisa, you mentioned that you've done some work with Northern Trust in terms of the advising and the appraisal, and could you speak a little more about some of the services?
Yes, we've done, we work a great deal with collections in terms of advice on how do you manage it, what do you hold on to, what do you think about selling, and how do you insure it. We had an interesting case recently. It was the first time I'd ever worked on it, where we were approached by Northern to look at a collection in terms of its potential across a spectrum of the sort of lifestyle of the collection, if I can explain it that way. And we were asked to break it down into which pieces would make sense to sell now based on the sort of the heightened market for those particular artists, which ones would be good ones to hold on to, and which part of the collection was pretty much going to be stable throughout the lifetime of the client. Now, this client is elderly. She's in her 80s. But it was the first time I'd ever worked on an appraisal where we were asked to sort of segment the collection into different sort of categories. And it was a very useful exercise, but it's also one of those organic exercises because we did this a year and a half ago. And my guess is if we went back and looked at it again, we would break it out differently now than we did a year and a half ago. So it's a very, I've been in Christie's a very long time, and we were sort of a fancy little art business 25 years ago, and now we are truly working with people who look at things as investments. And I reacted negatively to that a decade ago when I got called and said, would I come speak on art as an investment? And I said, well, no, I don't look at art that way. And of course, now that sounds completely foolish, but at the time it was true, because I thought you bought because you loved it. And you still should buy out there because you love it, but you can't ignore the fact that there is an incredible investment involvement in what we're all doing. But I think it's fun to look at collections that way and to work with them, and we've done that with a number of Northern clients where we do appraisals on that basis.
Okay, great. So let's continue this discussion to everyone on the panel about collecting, and what other tips do you have to offer collectors here at the fair? We spoke about initially, I know in discussions we talked about studio visits. What are some of the good stories or good lessons that you can share with the audience?
I'd say use your local museums. I mean, there is no question that museums offer so much knowledge in an opportunity to pick the brains of the curators at museums. They love it. They love to talk about what they do. And use it as a reference point for understanding the importance of different artists, how an artist evolves from their early part of their career to the latter part of their career.
Yeah. I have a perspective from the standpoint of working with clients who have a fair number of pieces in their collection, and the importance, I would say, under the category of an important tip, the importance of keeping an inventory. Make sure that you photograph the artwork, that you know where it is, that you have an idea of its value from an appraisal. A partner of mine was walking through the house of a client who'd passed away and reviewing the inventory, and kind of took a glance outside and saw the backyard and saw some kind of a pile of rocks in the distance there with grass growing around it. Didn't pay much attention until he got to the point in the inventory where that was actually a sculpture, and it was by a famous artist. And so it was he was grateful to have had the inventory there to make sure that he could keep track of each piece of artwork. So.
Great.
I, of course, agree with Lisa, get involved with a museum, but it is important because when collectors come to the Warhol Museum, they are astonished that there are so many pieces of Warhol that they've never seen. They've never seen anything like it. They had no idea the breadth of the work. So as they're out there building their collection, it really provides them with some vital guidance about the context for any particular work of art. And I think particularly in Warhol's career, it's really important to understand what came after the 60s, what came after the 70s. Is something related to the films? All of those things are items that are valued for us when we're deciding what to show, how to show it. And, we're really happy to receive collectors. We don't advise you necessarily on buying, but we're happy to talk to you about the importance of certain works of art that Warhol may have executed and how they fit into the larger value. Having said that, I also think it's so much fun to get to know living artists, especially young living artists, and I know that that's been part of the joy of collecting for me, to get to know a young artist, to understand what they're working on, to have a relationship with them. So both of those things are really rewarding, and I think one informs the other and adds to this passion for collecting.
Great. So then I think that the most natural last question to everyone would be, what do you collect and why?
I collect artists who I know. I've been fortunate to do projects with artists like Catherine Opie and Robert Gober. So although those are blue chip artists, they're also my friends and people I know and love. And we live in Pittsburgh, and it's not so easy for a young artist in Pittsburgh. Chicago has a wealth of galleries compared to Pittsburgh. So for a young artist making their career there, we've been trying to support them. So it's really a mix of things that might appear blue chip and things that are really emerging artists.
And Lisa?
Well, I just work at Christie's, so and I love what I do. I left banking to join Christie's a long time ago, so I think I might be buying more if I were still in banking. But we've started collecting. My husband grew up on a farm in Iowa, so to convince him to even think about artwork was a whole another concept in our household. But now he's caught on more than I have. But we collect works on paper primarily by we have a baby contemporary sale we do twice a year, and that's the place where I look for great works on paper by fairly well-known artists, because you can buy them for considerably less than the big pieces. And I happen to be very fond of works on paper by sculptors, so I appreciate that sort of that. And then we have a lot of other things, and then we frame some of my son's artwork too. So
Yeah.
we've got it all working in the house. So
Yeah.
mixed bag.
Yeah, the family collection's important. I've got an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old who generate a lot of artwork. But I echo what Patrick said. I mean, I think that being able to hang a painting by somebody that you've spoken with about what they were thinking at that time is great. For me, it's within my price point as well, so it's a win-win, and I think that's been my approach.
Great, thank you. So I think at this time we're going to ask the audience if you have any questions of the panelists. Sir, would you like to start?
Yes. Andy Warhol brought xerography, screen printing as an art form. Where is screen printing today as far as?
I'm just going to repeat the question with regards to screen printing and where is screen printing today? And would you like to direct that to anyone, or would you like to?
Patrick, you're probably.
Well, I can
tackle-
talk about
yeah,
it.
certainly.
You're absolutely right, sir. Warhol did not invent silk screening, but he was the first artist to take it from a commercial process into the fine art market. And it continues to be a touchstone for many contemporary artists. But I think that a lot of people don't understand that what was truly extraordinary about silk screening was not that it was just commercial, but it truly is the bridge between a photograph and a painting. And for Warhol, so much of his work is photo-based, and he was completely shameless in just finding a photograph and taking it and making it into a work of art. He didn't worry about permissions, he didn't worry about contracts. This is why we have so many sleepless nights at the museum, but I think that process of silkscreen printing has not only become important for a lot of other contemporary artists, but it's become important for us as a museum, because we work with children in a lot of different areas of Pittsburgh and also in China when we're doing shows, and we teach them how to silkscreen as well. And they are able to take images that are important of parts of their life, people that they appreciate and admire, and then take it into a painting form. The thing about it, the flip side, is many people think of Warhol's work as almost like just reproduction because of the use of silk screens. It is amazingly hard to do what Andy Warhol did with selecting colors to do underpainting and then combining it with silk screening. So we made an app that was about silk screening. And everybody complains it's so hard. You know, everybody wants to take a picture and then turn it into an Andy Warhol. But it is intentionally hard because it really shows people that silk screening is really only the beginning of the process. An artist's hand really factors into what becomes of those images.
A question from you? Yeah.
How do you go about, if you do, if it is possible, I'm going to invite Christie, appraising emerging artists' work? Is that possible, or not?
I just wanted to repeat the question so everybody could hear. In terms of emerging artists, the question was from a valuation perspective, how do you go about the appraisal?
Right. The key with appraisals is to make sure that you have somebody who has an expertise in that particular area of art. So, the follow-on question I sense is, well, how do you find somebody that is or
Suppose you go to a gallery in Chicago,
Yeah.
and they've got work from an instructor at the Art Institute, and you buy it.
yeah.
How do you appraise that, or can you?
Well, at least initially, when we're given that kind of appraisal to do, we will use the purchase price as the appraisal value. Because if you don't have comparables to work from, it's irresponsible to just kind of guess at something. So often we will do an appraisal, we'll ask, do you have the paperwork for it? And we will say to the client, for now, it makes sense to value this at the purchase price, and we should revisit that as this artist, either becomes more popular or doesn't as you go through the life of owning that work of art. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
No,
but,
that's
yeah,
great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. Sir?
What are you insuring against? Theft?
Sure. An insurance question. Wow, I wasn't expecting it.
You just thought you were moderating.
Yeah. So I work for an insurance company, and we do insurance for museums, galleries, and private collections. And it's the private collection policy is a physical loss or damage policy. So it's fire, theft, water damage. If there's a change in the ownership structure, if it's repossessed by the government, it's not covered. Those things we don't cover. If it's photography that is in sunlight and fades over time, there's no coverage. So it's fire, theft, water damage, the basic insurance perils. And you have a second question? The bonus round.
Security,
Yeah.
guard, balance sheet.
Sure. Yeah. So we're in a situation where a client has liquid assets invested with us. We can extend a line of credit, and then they can use that to borrow and purchase artwork. On a case-by-case basis, we will also lend against the artwork itself, and that's a particular kind of customized kind of loan.
Great. Any other questions, sir? Okay. Authenticity. What was the question?
How do you authenticate? No.
No, and it's important for me to say that the Warhol Foundation is entirely separate than the Warhol Museum. We were started by the Warhol Foundation. The foundation stopped authenticating a few years ago, and the museum does not authenticate artworks by Warhol. However, I think the auction houses are still a great course to work through. And, with Christie's, the work is coming from the foundation, so it is inherently authenticated. So certainly that work that's being sold from the foundation through Christie's is a primary source of authenticated material. Other than that, it's very complicated with Warhol.
Yeah, anything that comes to us outside of what was the foundation property, unless it's very, very clear that it is a Warhol work based on documentation, it is complicated to authenticate. And we're not quite sure where that's going, quite frankly. But for now, it's not an easy exercise.
We often get phone calls at the museum. I have a paper plate that Andy Warhol signed. What should I do with it? And I have a soup can. Andy Warhol signed it. And we said, well, first of all, take the soup out of it because it's going to explode.
And then call Christie's.
And then call Christie's. But Andy was a person who was out in the world who was not exactly social, but in a social context. He'd sign all sorts of things. But there's a difference between an autograph and an artwork, and I think that becomes somewhat complicated with Warhol and with other artists. But a lot of the people who get anxious about what they own, it doesn't have a provenance because it was a casual signature on something. I don't know if that would be the Christie's point of view, but...
Yes, that would be, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I wanted to thank the panelists. I want to thank Lisa, Patrick, and Christopher for joining us today. And I want to thank the audience because this is what's exciting. It's a fair. It's about collecting. It's learning from your experts. It's going to the museums. It's speaking at the fairs with dealers, all of those things. And I think it's a lifelong passion. So thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.